Russian problems in Ukraine and the Russian inability to invade Ukraine successfully is not something as by chance, or it's not something which could be corrected, but it's a steady sort of flow of mistakes, a steady flow of incapabilities, and believe that this will continue in the future.
Russia has announced the withdrawal of its forces from the occupied Ukrainian city of Kherson, the only regional capital that Moscow has captured since the invasion began. In a televised conversation, the Russian Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu said it was no longer possible to supply its troops and they would regroup outside the city.
For us, the lives and health of Russian servicemen are always a priority. We must also take into account the threat to the civilian population and make sure that all civilians who want to leave can leave. We will proceed with the withdrawal of troops and take all measures to ensure the safe transfer of personnel, weapons and equipment across the Dnieper River.
Well, it would be one of the most significant retreats of the war, but Ukraine has reacted cautiously, waiting to see evidence of the withdrawal. Earlier, I spoke to Andriy Zagorodnyuk, former defence minister for Ukraine and the current chair of the Centre for Defence Strategy in Kyiv. And I asked him what he thought of this announcement from Russia that it was pulling its troops out of Kherson.
Well, first of all, it is inevitable that they're going to lose Kherson because they don't have enough forces to protect it, to defend it from our Ukrainian forces. So certainly, the group which they have there is clearly not capable of holding it for an indefinite period of time. And basically, the state of their forces, the state of their equipment, the state of their command and control function is all saying that it's just a matter of time when they lose Kherson. So now they have two options. The option number one is to leave it, and the option number two is to try to hold it and then leave it in some period of time. And certainly, it was clear that they were preparing to leave because they moved out the administration. They moved so-called occupational administration. They moved lots of equipment, weapons. They moved money from the bank. They moved even paintings from the picture gallery they have stolen and moved out, and many other things. So essentially, they've been preparing it for some time.
So you are confident that they are leaving, because I know that some in the Ukrainian government have been quite cautious about this in case it's a trap.
Well, obviously they're not leaving yet. They're leaving as administration. They're leaving parts of their forces. At the same time, they haven't moved most of their forces, and they haven't moved all their forces for sure. So yes, it's absolutely clear that they keep a significant amount of troops there, and we also have indication that they move some troops in Kherson. So actually, it doesn't seem like they are leaving quickly. So the statement which they made, first of all, it could be some sort of a safety net for the commander to ensure that they already prepare the audience, Russian audience and Russian government for the fact that Kherson will be left. But at the same time, it doesn't seem like they are running out right now. And so we believe that there is a high chance that they will be still making some fights, and basically battlefield situation is not going to be easy in the next in the foreseeable future.
Nonetheless, if Russia does go ahead and pull its forces out, that would be quite a significant moment in the war, wouldn't it?
Of course, that would be a huge step for us, for Ukraine, because Kherson is the largest city they occupied. It's one of the largest cities they occupied originally, and it's a regional center, Kherson region, and it's a very important from strategic perspective because it guards the entrance to the Dnieper River, and it's several 100,000 population city. Used to be before the war. So yeah, absolutely, it's an important. Also, they've been telling everyone that Kherson will be with Russia forever. and they've been quite active with propaganda that Russia came there for an indefinite period of time, like forever. So the fact that they would be leaving it, obviously, it destroys a lot of their messaging which they've been originally sending.
Nonetheless, Russia has been continuing to carry out these attacks on power stations and other infrastructure across Ukraine. So it doesn't look as though pulling out of Kherson is anything more than perhaps a tactical retreat.
Russia strategically haven't changed their plans at all. Of course, they're still planning to continue the war. They still plan to continue the war in other areas, in other operational directions, as we call them. So, like in other regions. So no, it doesn't mean that they are stopping. It only means that they realize that keeping Kherson, particularly that region, is pretty much impossible for them. So they're preparing the Russian audience, they're preparing the government, they're preparing the international audience that to the fact that they may leave, and if they do, that this is something which they plan, this is something which they control, and which is something they do as a goodwill, rather than they've been pushed by Ukraine. But in reality, of course, it's only because Ukrainian forces make their positions in Kherson region intolerable.
So are Ukrainian forces now preparing to go into the city itself and to regain control there?
We've been preparing for some time, and yes, but again, we're not expecting this to be an easy operation. As I said, we see the substantial amount of Russian forces there, so we shouldn't expect it to be something very quick and something without the fight. So yeah, this is going to be a substantial endeavor still.
We have had NATO's Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg in Britain, meeting our new Prime Minister Rishi Sunak today. Jens Stoltenberg, has praised Britain for its support. How significant do you think is the equipment and the training and so on that Britain and its allies are providing for Ukraine?
Well, Britain is clearly one of the top supporters of Ukraine for all times. I mean, Britain supported Ukraine for almost 9 years of the war since 2014. It's been one of the most active country in military reform, in supplying us with training facilities, with some substantial capabilities, with weapons. So yeah, I mean, there's absolutely no doubt that Britain was absolutely crucial for us to be able to fight successfully.
And are you confident that our new Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, will show the same personal commitment to this cause that, of course, you had originally from Boris Johnson, who formed such a strong bond with President Zelensky?
Yes, we first of all, our president was the first person new prime minister has called, and in diplomatic language that means very top of the foreign policy, very top priority in the foreign policy. So that's a great sign. And from what we see from speaking to British politicians, observers, analysts, journalists, and of course military, we see not even a sign of any reduction or any kind of reconsideration. We see absolute determination to continue supporting us until the victory, which I'm sure is going to happen.
And what is the most important thing for your country now? We are seeing these continued Russian attacks, as I mentioned, and as you have referred to, on power plants and so on. There's been a lot of talk about air defenses. Is there still a need for more of those sorts of weapons and equipment?
Yeah, of course, it's one of the top, if not the very top, in the list of priorities, because indeed Ukrainian air defense is exhausted in a way, because we've been having those attacks for all these months of the war. Russia is throwing at us all they have right now, so all kinds of missiles from all different directions, including from Belarus, including from the Black Sea. So essentially, we have like 2,000 kilometers of the border with Belarus and Russia. We have 1,000+ kilometers of the coast of Black Sea and Sea of Azov. So all these areas are vulnerable to the air raids and airstrikes, and of course, air defense is extremely important in this regard.
And clearly, Russia is hoping that this sort of tactic, these power cuts that it's inflicting and so on, will erode the morale of the Ukrainian people. Do you think that the people there in Ukraine will be buoyed by what we're hearing about Kherson, that they will perhaps see this as potentially, at least, a turning point in the war?
They will see this as a massive step. I don't think they will be considered as a turning point, because we've already seen these turning points. We've already seen Russian troops running from Kharkiv area in a great numbers, like in tens of thousands. We have seen them left Kiev area and the north of Ukraine. So we've seen Russian troops retreating before. So we already understand that they are going to run from the other areas as well. Also, it's important to understand we already liberated over the half of their territory which they originally occupied from the beginning of from the end of February. So the progress is there. It's not as fast as many people want, obviously, but it's there, and it's steady, and it's going. Of course, Kherson will be a huge part of that progress. But we need to understand that it's not something like which changes the tide of the war. I mean, because we've been steadily pushing Russians out during all these months. However, that indicates that Russian problems in Ukraine and the Russian inability to invade Ukraine successfully is not something as by chance, or it's not something which could be corrected, but it's a steady sort of flow of mistakes, a steady flow of incapabilities, and believe that this will continue in the future.
Andriy Zagorodnyuk, former Defence Minister, Chairman of the Centre for Defence Strategy in Kyiv, speaking to me just a little earlier.